Welcome to this episode of Talkin' Fire. Our guest on this episode is Battalion Chief Brett Loomis. Maybe you know who Brett is. If you haven't heard from him before, you're going to be really excited to hear all the good things we talked about. We talked about the incident power curve, the NIOSH top 5, and an incident that really defined him recently as an amazing fire service leader. It's a great conversation. Thanks for checking it out. Welcome, Battalion Chief Brett Loomis, to the Talkin' Fire podcast. Chief, how are you?
Dean, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
No, really, thank you for being here, for being a part of what we're doing. I think it's a testament to how you want to share what you know and the experiences you've had in your 35 plus years in the fire service. And I'm certain that most of that's going to come out in the next hour or so that we talk. I find that, most people, especially when you put a couple people that are passionate about what we do, we start having a conversation, and all of that experience and all of those thoughts just seem to come out. So you're at Corvallis Fire in Oregon.
Correct.
And did I say it right, Oregon?
You did. Yep. Corvallis, Oregon.
I tried. Yep. Not your first department up there, but you're from the West Coast. Before that, Salem, and before that, in Salinas, California.
Yes.
Which was the bulk so far, been the bulk of your time, 25-ish years?
That was the bulk of my time, 25 plus years there. Retired from there as the Deputy Chief of Ops. Came up through the ranks, starting as a firefighter, and that's where I cut my teeth.
Excellent. And you do what a lot of people do, move north.
I moved north, looked for a little bit larger opportunity, landed in Salem as their Deputy Chief of Operations, and I got a great group of brothers and sisters up there in Salem, and got in there and saw some really good work, and just due to circumstance, it was not a good fit in the long term, which was okay, right? Sometimes that happens. And ironically enough, 40 minutes down the road, Corvallis was hiring a shift battalion chief, and I threw my hat in the ring, and here I am.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. How just opportunity, sometimes the fit's not right, sometimes there's another opportunity, and so often, people get stifled if they get entrenched somewhere and they say, this is where I need to stay, instead of maybe this isn't where I belong. And I know, and I'm sure you do too, a lot of people that have just stayed somewhere. Well, because I've been here for 25 years, I've been here for 30 years, I've been here for 15 years. I'm just going to stay, and and the fit isn't there anymore. And sometimes we get to make that decision, and sometimes the universe makes that decision for us. Some people delay that decision, and then the universe says, you're not fit here anymore. Like, why don't you look at something else? And then all of a sudden you find yourself in an amazing opportunity that maybe you wouldn't have gone looking for. And not necessarily maybe your case, but just in general. And I think so often people don't look for that other opportunity, and just do whatever it is. And it's cool because when we move departments or we move organizations, we take what we know and we go somewhere new and we try to apply it there. And then we kind of learn what they've been doing, and we see how what we've got fits there, and they figure out what they can maybe extract from us. Right.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah. Early on in my company officer career, I attended a training, and retired Fire Chief Randy Bergman, who the last department he retired from was Anaheim Fire and Rescue down in Southern California. He was teaching there, and one of the things he said was, sometimes the best thing a leader can do for its organization is leave it. And at the time, right, being a company officer and having my eyes set on higher rank, I wasn't able to understand that until I moved up through the ranks. And it was like, there's a timing where maybe my toolbox has run its course, and it's time to hand off the organization to the next generation of leaders so that they can continue it down the path. And again, as I put on gold and I got promoted to battalion chief in Salinas in 2005, so 20 years ago. That those words have really resonated with me. And I keep them in the back of my mind so that I'm not becoming the impedance to progress because I'm running out of tricks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. And one of my friends, acquaintances, whatever, on the law enforcement side, he's leaving a department that he's been at for 20 plus years. He's retiring. And he even said, part of the reason he's going is because he's got a strong number two who can do the job, and he's aging as well. And he's like, I need to get out of the way and let him do the job for a little while.
Yeah,
And sometimes that's, that's important too, right? Like, we harp on, I think so often, at least leaders, right? Leaders maybe want to rise to the top. And we sometimes forget the value in that number two or that number three spot. That
sure.
there's sometimes that number two or three job, that shift command level, or just that next step above, is everything you want, with
Yep.
less of the headache of that top job. And that's why, like, when people talk about the chief, the person at the top, and they kind of talk ill sometime maybe about their performance as a company level officer or whatnot, it's a different skill set right there at the top. I'm not saying they could be poor performers at the lower levels, but that top skill set now, especially in 2025, I mean, they're doing HR work, they're doing CFO work, CEO
Yep.
work. I mean, they're running multi-million-dollar businesses in a way. Like, yeah, they have to be able to do the company officer job, right? They have to know how to do that, but they don't have to be perfect at it.
Right.
At least that's the way I see it, because I'd much rather they be perfect at getting grant money or whatever, right, in that top job.
When I moved up to battalion chief, I was part of management, in Salinas, and the amount of information that I thought I knew that I had no clue when I moved into battalion chief. And then a couple years down the road, I ended up being the interim deputy for about a year. Our fire chief transitioned out. My boss, the deputy, moved up to interim, and I stepped in. And I was astounded at the amount of information and the amount of things I learned about my department that I didn't know even as a battalion chief. The day in and the day out, the 15 phone calls a day from vendors, the number of, complaints that would come in that would be looked at without being filtered to us, because once they were looked at, they were completely unfounded. The managing the budget, the HR, the workers' comp, all of those things. And it was just so eye-opening to recognize that. And we do, Brett's opinion, right, is we do a really poor job in a number of areas in the fire service. Not saying Salinas, not saying Corvallis, not saying anywhere else, but we do a great training on teaching firefighters how to rescue people, how to put out fires, how to ventilate, how to force entry, auto X, EMS. I know EMS is a bad word for some people, but EMS is real, right? I mean, let's be honest. All of those things, but we don't teach them all the other stuff. If you want to move up, maybe we should send some of those people that want to move up to some business classes, some professional communication classes. We 100% of the time, what do? We people. We people 100% of the time. But we don't teach, even at the recruit level, we don't teach how to people. We don't teach how to communicate. We don't teach that you're going to encounter my shift has 20 career firefighters on it. And so if you're one of those 20 firefighters, there's 19 other personalities that you have to understand and know how they tick to be a part of their team and then be a part of yours. We don't delve into that in how we train people. And now more than ever, with the changing landscape of society, with different norms, with different laws and regulations, a firefighter is way more likely to lose their job at the kitchen table than they are to lose their job because of a bad mistake out in the field. Not saying it can't happen out in the field, and we're going to talk a little bit about mistakes in the field, right? That's why we're on this show right now. But I'm going to get off my soapbox a little bit, but there's a lot more that we could be doing to raise that bar and prepare our future leaders to be more successful for the firefighters.
Yeah, I think that so often, you get a posting for that entry level officer job, whether it's lieutenant or captain, maybe it's a shift commander on a smaller organization, whatever it might be.
Yep.
And, it's fire officer one. Okay, you got to meet the NFPA standards. You got to have fire officer one. Maybe you have to have fire officer two or something. And like almost departments then say, well, good enough. Or, but do they send you to a seminar every year? Do they let you go to the local whatever seminar? Do they send you to somebody go to a regional seminar?
Right.
What are you doing? Because I wrote it down. When you see me looking away there, I'm writing stuff down, and I love that 100% of the time we people, because wow, that's like so true. And we don't train on that. We don't train on the peopling. We train on everything else. And we maybe do some. We do some.
Sure, sure.
But is it that broad brush, check the box? Yeah, we trained on that stuff. Or is it, hey, listen, we want to help you maximize your team's performance. And to do that, you got to get to know everybody on the team. Well, I'm not a
Right.
people person. Well, you're not a people person, then you're not a leader. Because leaders have to be people. Like
Absolutely.
and there was a time, probably the people that maybe raised our age group, they gave an order and people followed it. And if that order was to put a smile on your face, people smiled. Like, kid, you're going to smile or I'm going to send you home. People smiled. The world's different now. And we could argue about whether that's right or wrong for hours, for
Oh,
probably
sure.
days or months. But it is. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter how we see the world personally. What matters is how we react to that world we're in. And whether we agree or disagree with some of the things that go on, we have to toe the line and hold the professional standard, and understand certain human resources elements, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. Because there's some things that are kind of the norm now in society that some people may not agree with. But if that's the cultural norm where you are, then you will have to, as a leader, manage that cultural norm.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so before we go too far, because I think this is going to just lead to great conversation um, about all kinds of things. Um, I read the trade journals. Although my primary responsibility is not response anymore, I still work per diem, but I still read all the trade journals because I love what we do, right? So I read fire engineering back in the spring, and your article comes up, and I'd seen your name before other places, but um, the article on the night I missed a Mayday, and I see that the byline is right there, and humility is in that line, like that right there. I think the fact that your name and those words are together in the header of that article speak volumes of character and humility, because
I appreciate that.
not everybody would say that. Because I'm even sure the article, we could have picked a different name that didn't
Yeah.
just put it out there. You put it out there. You put it right on the line. You said, the night I missed a Mayday. There's no
Yeah.
BS what this article is going to be about. And I think that even right now, like looking at this, I highlighted a bunch of stuff because that's how I read. And I highlighted a bunch of stuff and just looking at that title, and now you're sitting here, and you and I had already had a phone call a couple of weeks ago about this, but like, I, yeah, to write an article that goes in an international publication, and then know you're going to have to talk to people about it like this.
Yeah.
Um, I think this is pretty cool, and I think that brings a lot of validity to the things we're about to talk about, because you can't hide from anything you wrote here. There's
Right.
nothing that you can say, no, that's not what happened. You
Yeah.
you put it here, right? So,
Yeah.
um, you want to just kind of tell us a story, and then
Yeah.
we'll talk kind of in some detail. But like the generic kind of, this is what happened that night.
Yeah. For sure. Um, yeah, it was a night in December, and I'm working the battalion. I work on the, I'll throw the plug out there for B shift on the B shift BC, and we snagged this job about 7:30 at night. I think we even jumped up from the kitchen table. We were still having chow and breaking bread together, and um, the department gives me a good old American-made high horsepower SUV, so I'm going to use it. Gosh darn it! And I shot up the roadway, and I'm getting information from my dispatch, and I talk in there a little bit, and when I teach, it's district chiefs, battalion chiefs, duty officers, somebody working up a shift. The moment those tones go off, I'm behind the power curve. We talked a little bit about power
Yeah,
curve, right? I'm behind it. My BC ride has a company phone. It has a personal phone that I use on duty during the company. I have three radios. I've got a computer. It's raining. It's cold. I'm trying to drive emergent. I have a lot of stuff going on. I'm trying to do some initial size up. I'm trying to think about what resources do I have. That particular night, one of my resources was a volunteer engine. The reason why I had that volunteer engine staffed is because it happened to be volunteer drill night and they were at the tower. So we had a career lieutenant and 5 volunteers on that engine. Okay. But and I started as a volunteer and I love volunteers. I think volunteers, they exist for the American Fire Service. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. But they don't get trained necessarily to the same standard that our career people do. So there's always that thought in my mind is, am I putting them in an assignment that they can be successful,
Hmm.
not only for them, but successful for the organization, right? So I'm going up there. Dispatch is feeding me a bit of information. I think I described in the article, I show up kind of a darker street and I'm like, gosh, dang it. I don't have any fire showing because I'd be seeing it. And then bing, there it is, right? So well, I was well ahead of the first in company by several minutes. I described in the article about how the first in station was closed for remodeling, so they're coming from further away. So, anyways, I bust out, throw my coat and helmet on real quick, go out face to face. For those of you that haven't, seen our curriculum and trained firefighters, I get a victim profile. Low victim profile. The 2 people that were inside that house said, "We're out. There are no humans in the house." Now, I learned this from a fire that I had in Salinas, and I want to bring it up right quick because I think it's really important. My next question to them was, "Do you rent space to anybody?" And their response was, "No, it's just us." I'm going to go a quick little sidebar. I had a job in Salinas, the second shift of a 48, right at 8 o'clock in the morning. Company shows up first, black smoke showing from the front door. Captain comes back. This is before victim profiling and says, I talked to the homeowner. We have an all clear. Nobody else is in the structure. All right, we go after this kitchen fire. Bam, 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 done deal. I walk in afterwards to take a look at things and I find a locked, closed bedroom door. Okay, I said to myself, I'm like, self, we don't teach people to lock doors after we search. So I'm like, who searched this room? And then, the firefighter's like, well, we didn't search it because we heard that everybody was out. I'm like, well, let's open this door right away. And we did, and we found a fellow asleep in bed, cold smoke ceiling to floor. Salinas is a high migrant population community because we're surrounded by row crops down there.
Hmm.
If you eat lettuce in the United States, more than likely it comes from Salinas, California. And so this person, the owner, rented space to this individual, rented a room. He didn't have a driver's license. So every morning at 4 a.m., somebody stopped and picked him up and took him to work. The assumption was he had gone to work that morning. That particular morning, he called in sick.
Oh,
So, not faults of my captain, not faults of my crew. They were making decisions based on information they were heard and told.
yep.
But that's why I asked the next question after we're all out. Do you rent space to anybody? A lot of communities now are converting garages into homes for people,
Hmm.
right? They're renting their garage spaces and those types of things. Anyways, I'm off on a tangent, Dean. I'll get back on the story, but
No, but it's a valuable tangent because I think that so often the question is there anybody else here?
right.
And that's the easy answer. No.
But
You
no,
know,
nobody else is here.
nobody else here. The guy we rent to's off to work. We're here. No, everybody's accounted for. But the
Exactly.
reality is, that's not necessarily the case. But if you ask the right questions, how do you know he's off to work? He leaves every morning at 4 a.m. Did you see him leave this morning? No. Okay, so now that, like you say, victim profiling, that changes a little bit. Okay, so
Yep.
tangent.
And in our victim profiling, if that person had said, no, I didn't see him leave, we would have gone from low to moderate
Yep. There you
at a
go.
minimum, right? So anyways, the
Yep.
people tell me I'm out. They tell me nobody, they don't rent space to anybody. They said the fire started in the back kind of dining room, family room, kitchen area. I got mid-hinge smoke out the front door. It's dark, it's black, it's starting to boil a little bit. I'm like, okay, this is coming our way here pretty quick. Be able to see the glow underneath. I look down 3 sides of the house. I don't get a full 360. And by that time, the first in company, which is our truck, it's a Quint. We won't talk about Quints, but anyways, well, Quint shows up and I've got an aggressive lieutenant first in on the Quint. He is a former military man, 3 tours in the Middle East. I mean, he has seen stuff, and I trust that man with my life. And I just said, "Hey, LT, task level fire attack through the front door." "Yes, sir, Chief." And he goes, he tries to do a 360. The fences are reinforced. So he said, Chief, I can't get a full 360. Can you get somebody to look at the back while we go after this? Yeah, sure. Next thing you know, the medic unit shows up. I give the medic unit the assignment of 2 out. We're in a low victim profile. So if I'm pushing people through the front door, I got to have that backup, right? So they put a line on the ground, backup in place, and then I start trying to make my way back to the buggy. I start trying to make my way back to the buggy. The pump's spinning. I got people talking to me. We had a problem at the plug with one of our volunteers. The engineer had to help out. Police department shows up. Where do you want us? Right? I'm sinking in the quicksand. I'm sinking in the quicksand. And then companies are arriving on scene. Command Engine 136, I'm on scene. Command Engine 132, I'm on scene. 133, right? They're all coming in. I'm doling out assignments. And I'm still not back to my buggy. I'm still not back to my buggy. I'm still not back to my buggy. I finally make it back to the buggy, and then I get a knock. Chief, we got water on the fire. Far out. Okay. I sent a crew in to search. They told me primary search was complete. They said, Chief, it's not a hoarder house, but it's not far from it. Okay. All right. So my risk spidey senses are up a little bit, right? If we're in
Mm-hmm.
a low victim profile, are we taking the right amount of risk for the right amount of reward? So I'm back out of my ride. I'm the homeowners come back to me. I'm sorry, the renters, not homeowners. They came back to me like, we got a couple of cats and a dog. If you can get them out for us, that'd be super helpful. We're going to do everything we can with,
Sure.
et cetera, so on and so forth. And then at some point, that lieutenant, that hardened military veteran lieutenant, he comes out to the front and he's got steam rising off him and he's got blown in insulation and his helmet's a little bit crooked. And I'm like, oh man, he had a good fight. He took some heat, all the right things. I had this little flashback to when I got to ride on a fire engine and get some of those jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was it. We started buttoning things up and we were doing a quick little hot wash in the front yard, and that's when somebody said, man, that Mayday really threw me for a loop. That is literally the first time I had heard about the Mayday. And I went like, what? What did you just say? Yeah, you didn't hear the Mayday? And I I don't know how to describe what hit me when that was said. I like the my space started to spin, my mouth was dry. I felt like the world falling in on me. I was weak in the disease. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, Dean, except for that. I was just mortified that I missed a Mayday. And
And this is like your whole like B shift is standing there, like B
B
shift
shift is standing there.
plus a couple of
All
you got
all my
some
firefighters
you got
with
some
the
volunteers.
volunteers,
I mean,
and
you've got
so I marched over to that lieutenant and I grabbed him and I said, A, are you okay? Yeah, Chief, I'm good. I said, B, I said, I cannot apologize to you enough for letting you down. I I I I threw a little colorful language in there. I'm like, I effing let you down today. Chief, you didn't leave me down, let me down. We're out. We're okay. I'm like, no, 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 love you, brother, but you're not letting me off the hook that easy. I just not gonna do it. And now what I found out was that my 2 out team did hear the Mayday, and they were the ones that assisted them out the back, the back window. That didn't make me feel any better at the time,
right.
but they were out. So I shifted into gear. The lieutenant that was on that volunteer engine is our union president. So I told him, hey, you got to know I missed this. Meeting on the phone with the operations chief, on the phone with the safety chief. I had a chief come in to back me up, a cover in the city. I said, you got to come out here and take this over, get the investigators involved. That chief that backing up the city, he was actually our safety committee chair also. I'm like, yeah, we got to do this the right way. We got to make this right. We got to find out what the problem is. I know exactly what the problem is
So
me.
I want to interrupt you there, Chief, for just a second. So
Yes,
in that
sir.
moment, and again, I don't think we have to speak to your credibility anymore because I think the people that watched this got that.
Yeah.
However, I don't think we can go any further without drawing attention to the fact that you could have, in that moment, looked at your boys and girls and said, "Wow, I'm glad we knocked this. I'm glad everything worked out." and let's pack up here and get back to the house. You could have taken a very different stance on this, and
Yeah,
that would have been a very different defining moment long term. Because in the moment,
absolutely.
right, that's I don't want to call that the easy decision because I don't think that's the easier. I've never been in that decision, so I don't want to say there's an easier or not. I think that there's a lot of folks that would have said, "Where's the broom? Somebody lift the corner of the rug because we're going to sweep this where it belongs. We're going to sweep it under the rug." And walk away from that and then be like, wow, no blood, no foul. And, but I think that sets you up for maybe a short term victory. I hate to call it that.
Yeah,
But a,
yeah,
but a
I'm following you
long,
though.
but a long term massive problem.
Yep.
Like your high road decision in that moment to involve all of the people that should know that this happened, like then that sets you up for future. I don't want to call it success, but like that credibility, right? That maintenance of your credibility. And
Yeah.
clearly, I mean, you're in Corvallis at this point. You've been in the fire service probably 31 or 32 years ish, or maybe a couple
Yep.
more.
Something like
Like,
that.
like you've come all that way clearly by one way, and that's doing things the right way. And that's what you did in that moment. So, okay, so sorry for interrupting, but I need to make
No,
sure that
no.
the folks listening to
I,
this know that in that moment, you could have very easily told someone to get a broom off the engine and somebody else would lift the carpet, and you could have swept this thing fast, but it would have left a lump in the carpet that would have been problematic.
yeah.
Um,
No, I agree 100%.
so you get
And
the
that's
people that are
just
coming in, you do the right thing, and then where's your mind go?
well, my mind goes to I still got work to do, right? The feelings didn't go away, but I still got things to do, right? We still got to overhaul this thing, but we got to investigate it, especially now since we had a near miss. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is, right?
Yep.
It's near miss. And so we get all the right people in place. My buddy, who I'm actually meeting after we get off the podcast here, he shows up and he sees it in my face. He sees it and he's like, "Brother, you need to go home." And I said, "I'm not going home. I no. What is that going to look like to my troops if the chief, I go home and pack my bag and I just drive home for the rest of the night? I ain't going home." I said, "Now, in the interest of fairness and making sure this is right for the organization," I said, "I'd really like it if you could kind of take the lead on some of the incident management stuff for me because I still need to make some phone calls and talk to some people and that type of thing." He was like, "Yes, sir, brother, not a problem." He's a great partner at the
Mm-hmm.
BC level. He's got my back. I've got his. Just a genuinely good Jake. And so, he helps get things aligned out. We decide that we're going to fire watch it so that the investigators can take a clean look when the sun comes up. We arrange the fire watch, and then, I go back and I talked to a number of people on the fire after that. It's kind of a blur.
Mm-hmm.
I know specifically I went up to the lieutenant and the firefighter who got, smacked down by that, big piece of ceiling falling in on him. And I made it abundantly clear that I was devastated that I let them down. And they were both so humble about, "Chief, it's okay." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not okay." And I said, kind of trying to be tongue in cheek, trying to be whatever. I'm like, "I teach this for a living. I do this for a living. How how I so egregiously dropped the ball here. I knew exactly how
Right.
I got sucked into the task level work of the incident and didn't stay strategic where I needed to be." So, and I wrote in the article, I know you all saw it, or those of you that read it. I went back to the station, cleaned up a little bit, and I laid down on my bunk and I freaking sobbed. I sobbed in that bunk. And I woke up the next morning, got relieved by my buddy, went home, talked to my wife a lot about it, and just kind of started I'll call it the healing process, but it wasn't quite the healing process. I called some of my fire service mentors, some of the people who have guided me through my career to where I'm at, and just almost like reaching out to them and asking for their forgiveness for letting them down. and they all had great words of wisdom and those types of things. And they said the same thing you did, Dean, and I appreciate you saying it when they said, the best thing you could have done is own it right there in front of your troops. And that's going to go a long way. So fast forward to May of 2025 when that article came out, that was kind of the closure for me. I'd felt like I had reinvested. I felt like I had tuned myself up. I felt like I made sure that my relationships were whole and good and solid, and it was time. And a number of people said, you got to write about it now. And that lieutenant came to me after that article, and he and I had a strong moment. There were a couple of years that tears that were shed because he was like, Chief, I will have your back until the end of time. I do not want you to think that I think any less of you. I saw it in the article, and so we kind of had closure for both of us, kind of in that. And he did not once. That man is one of the most honorable men I've ever worked with, and I knew it all along. I knew it all along going through the last, couple of years of recovering from that. Um, but I think we both kind of had that closure a little bit, and I really honor and respect him for coming to me and doing that. And then the firefighter that was involved in that, he's moved on to another organization up here in the Pacific Northwest, but he reached out to me also after the article came out and said the similar thing, and said some really kind words about my role and influence in his career. So I felt like the timing was right, and I've gotten some amazing positive responses from people all over the nation where I've taught, or people that have, got my contact information from someone and
Hmm.
said, I read your article and I loved it. Thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for showing what, leadership in my mind is. So that's the summary, my friend.
and and there's just so much that we can talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the power curve. So you talk. If you've read the article, if you haven't, like it's worth the read. Like it's 4 pages, and it's 4 pages that's well worth the read. I think pretty much every edition is worth the read, but like the 4 pages is well worth the read. Um, you mentioned, I mean, no less than 5 times something to the effect of, we're further behind the power curve. We're behind in the power curve. We're further behind the incident power curve. And just that slipping away, looking back on the incident. What is the power curve? What does that mean when we talk about I'm still behind the power curve? I started highlighting it because it's what does that mean?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way without having my, our graph that we put up, right? Every incident, there's critical factors and there's time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Critical factors from the point of ignition, to growth, to recognition, to calling the 911, and each minute that passes by, right, puts us closer and closer to a higher hazard situation. And so, but you have that standard buildup, right? Company arrives at scene, arrival report, smoke and fire showing, pull a couple of lines, go after fire, get some searching done, right? And then, yep, we're getting water on the fire. We got a primary search complete. Transition to second, we got a hole in the roof, and we kind of get this peak, this first little peak, right? And then things are starting to go our way. And so then it starts kind of dying off a little bit. Maybe the companies that you pushed in, it's time to come out and cycle in a new cylinder. But some agencies, you might only have 6 or 8 people showing up on these if you're fortunate, right? So everybody's coming out at the same time, slapping cylinders, new air, whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
And in that lull, right, some things may be starting to happen. A couple hidden pockets of fire we don't know about. A locked door where somebody's sleeping behind it, all of those little things. And then the thing starts ramping up again, and that next peak's a little bit higher. Maybe it's a ceiling falling in. Maybe we're talking about an intentionally lit fire and another incendiary point decides to take off, right? Whatever those things are, the Mayday, and you're up at the second peak of your incident and it's going. And ideally, your preparation, your lean in, your everything that you've done, ordering resources, deploying resources, good deployment of incident command, divisions and groups, having tactical supervisors, that constant risk assessment, all those NIOSH fives,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of those things are happening so that you're ahead of that wave when it comes. You know, to put it in an analogy, you think about a 400-meter dash. I can't believe anybody calls 400 meters a dash. I haven't run in my life and I wouldn't even start. But when we get tapped on that fire is 100 to 200 meters ahead of where we're starting. And what we have to do is not only overcome that 200 meters, but we've got to be 100 meters in front of it to get to the finish line first. So another way to think of that power curve is we've got to overcome everything that has happened to the point of us being involved in that incident, the tones dropping, and anticipate, know your building, know your fire ground, know your combat zone, know your enemy, and have to outthink it and outsmart it and be ahead of it, to be ahead of that big incident. So you're prepared for it. You're ready for it, whether it's having an ambulance on scene in case you have a firefighter injury, or you come across a civilian
Yep.
and you have to pull a civilian out. Whether it's adding an engine in a truck to your alarm because, yeah, this is my spidey senses are up on this a little bit, and if I don't order those things, they may get tapped out on a ringing alarm, on the other side of town, and they're not going to be available to me, whatever the case is. It's all of those things that we're trying to stay ahead of that big wave on that power curve.
Okay. I got a vision now,
Yeah.
that power curve. Um, and then if we read and we start talking about, can we talk about the danger of task saturation for company officers to an extent and
Hmm.
command level officers to a different extent? Because I got to tell you, one of the things, when I had promoted a small department by a lot of standards, it was
Sure.
a medium sized department at the time around here, but we were running I think 4 shifts at the time. I promoted maybe 3, and we were doing something, and it was a chimney fire that maybe it extended into the red brick facade of the fireplace, and the backseat guy was taking the chimney apart, and I was kind of standing there paying attention, looking at the tick, doing whatever I was doing, and a couple of people are just taking some brick out. Right, we're trying to do the right thing and do it kind of orderly.
Yeah.
And afterward, he said to me, one of the people on the crew, and I was a young officer, and he said to me, he goes, "So is this how it's going to be now? We're going to do the work, and you're going to stand there and watch?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I got into it with him about. I said, "If you think that I was standing there watching, I'm sorry. I guess I hadn't defined what I was doing. I'm not standing there watching. I'm keeping the homeowner at bay, who's there because the fire's not really a fire right now, but it's something we got to
Hmm.
investigate. I'm keeping the homeowner at bay. I'm keeping you safe, potentially, depending on what's going on. We are taking the red brick out of the fireplace. I mean, things could change.
Yep.
I'm making sure that, I'm looking at the tick, making sure that this thing's not spreading, and now we have a fire in the wall." I said, "So I'm not standing there while you do the work. I'm just doing different work."
Yeah.
And, I always tried to fight against that task level work because I knew the risk associated. And you talk about the associated risk, and you talk about the danger of, particularly in your case, the incident commander getting task saturated. So, you know, what does that mean to become task saturated, and what is the real hazard in your
Yeah.
view?
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. That's a good question. So I think, the first step is talk a little bit about kind of what I like to think about the three levels of the incident, right? You have task level work, you have tactical level work, and you have strategic level work, right? Task level work is just what it is. It's everything from throwing a breather on your back to wrapping a plug, advancing a line, doing a search, forcing the door, cutting a hole, right? All that stuff, all the stuff that we teach in the academy. um, Tactical level, and it's kind of what's now. It's kind of the working boss, and you can have company officers who are at the task level,
Mm-hmm.
right? You absolutely could have that, but then you got to have that tactical space that's looking a little bit larger, keeping that 6 to 50 foot picture, watching smoke, watching fire conditions, coordinating with whether it's rooftop ventilation, whether it's horizontal ventilation, making sure that everybody is on the same page when we're creating flow paths, right? And we're achieving what the tactical objectives are based on the strategy. 95% of our fires are what? They're offensive. We're going to work, right? We're fighting the beast. So And the two top priorities are going to be searching and attacking the fire. That's what we do. We search and attack the fire. So that tactical level coordination and making sure that those things are getting done in support of an offensive strategy, and then that person's thinking about what's next. Okay, I got a primary search complete. What do I need to do next? Oh, I need to do a secondary search with different eyes,
Hmm.
that type of stuff. And then the strategic, obviously, being the then what if, right? The then what if would have been what happens if I have a Mayday? What happens if I have a hostile fire event? What happens if I have a structural collapse? Those types of things. So at the task level, I kind of described some of the tasks that I was getting sucked into is, and I think I described it, I know I described it in the article a little bit about, the human brain really doesn't truly multitask, right? We do multiple tasks in very rapid succession.
Hmm.
And um, and how do we do that? We do it with our five senses, right? Our touch, our taste, our hearing, our sight, and our smell. And the brain's designed to shut out external stimuli when we're trying to work on those tasks. And when somebody's talking in your ear and then somebody else tries to talk to you on the radio, something's going to give. Something's going to give. And in that night, what gave is I didn't hear the Mayday because I was engaged in some other things. I had other noises, other this, other that. Not looking at the large picture. Each level of that incident has its responsibility. Task is 0 to 6 feet, right here, right now. Tactical is that 6 to 50 foot, looking at the larger picture, and that incident commander, that strategic supervisor putting the plan together. I always tell my firefighters, I am assigning you expecting the absolute best. We're going to put a knock on the fire, primary search, secondary search. We're going to punch a hole. We're going to do all of these things, and that's going to be a done deal. But I'm in my buggy planning for a Mayday, planning for a hostile fire event, planning that it's going to get outside of the box that we defined, and making a decision about where is my new box and how am I going to staff that new box. Now, I'm also in a system, we've gotten a lot better in our system, but I know that there are chiefs listening and company officers listening all over the place where, chief, not only do you have to run your incident, but you still have to run your city.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
still have to talk to the dispatcher and say, I need you to move this new mutual aid company to cover this house. I need this mutual aid company to cover this house. I need this ambulance to respond. We still have departments all over the nation that have, work with a private ambulance company. And this is not a dig on private ambulance. That's not what this is about, but that will not send an ambulance to a working structure fire. Okay, well, what happens if, the brothers and sisters crawl through the door and they go right through the floor into the basement? And now you're waiting 12, 15, 18, 20 minutes
Hmm.
for an ambulance to show up, right? That's the strategic level stuff that needed to be happening that I wasn't doing that night. And so I think that in and of itself, it recognizing that there's three levels, each of those levels has to be adequately staffed
Yep.
for a successful outcome and to stay ahead of that power curve. And more importantly than that, staying ahead of that power curve is keeping those NIOSH fives from coming into alignment. Those NIOSH five are like the second wave of the enemy. The first enemy is the fire, right? The second wave of the enemy is the NIOSH five. And if you don't put tactical and division supervisors with good objectives, good understanding of the strategy and what needs to happen, and you let those other, that second wave of enemies start creeping in, you're going to have some bad stuff happening. Now, I'm not saying that on this fire, if I would have been at the command post, I'm not saying that that ceiling might not have still fell in. It probably would have, right? But I would have been able to immediately respond with all companies on the Sycamore incident, emergency traffic. We have a declared Mayday unit with the Mayday, go. And if I could play the audio for you, Dean, you would shake your head because when I went back and listened to the audio, I felt 100 times worse because it wasn't it wasn't like that. It was as if we were doing a drill at the tower.
Ooh.
It was Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. He was as clear and concise. He wasn't stepped on by other radio traffic, none of that. So I would have been there to appropriately respond to the Mayday, make sure that all of the right people heard I would have been pulling additional resources, getting people out of staging, right? Medic gurney and gear, all of that
Hmm.
stuff. So, this is the example of the danger of getting sucked into task for sure.
Yeah. So, and you talk about that auditory exclusion, right? Because that's going to be the
Yeah,
first. It's going to be the first sense maybe you drop.
absolutely.
Is going to be what we hear. And it's funny because most of us get exposed to that at some point in time. I don't know exactly where you grew up in California, but it snows where I am, right? And that's a
Yeah,
common
the
thing.
snow's illegal in California.
Yeah,
They don't allow
right.
it.
I got it exactly. It's one of the
Yeah.
things. Yeah, fair. And I recall, being in my mother's, '86 Pontiac Parisienne in the snowstorms, and her turning the radio down. Right. And I mean, my mother wasn't old then. I mean, she was. I mean, my mother's not old now. But I would never accuse her of being old.
Never.
Never.
Nope. Mm-mm.
But I mean, she is probably like 40. I don't know, 38. And I distinctly remember, like, it's snowing, windshield wipers on, nighttime, and her turning the radio down. And it's funny because you always think, or at least I did as a kid, like, what are you doing? You turning the radio down is just going to drive me nuts because now I'm not listening to the radio anymore. But it has
Yeah.
no impact on your ability to drive this car. And the funny part is, right, as an adult now, right, like I turn the radio down, and
Uh-huh.
because it allows us then to focus up differently. But on the fire ground, we can't turn the radio down, right? Because the radio is one of our key pieces. But we have to fight against all that other task and all of that other information. And I'm going to guess when we think we're ahead of the power curve and we let our guard down a little bit, now all of a sudden we're missing some things.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing that can happen, and you reference it in this article, but it doesn't just happen in this article's fire. It happens almost every fire. Uh, is that we allow the NIOSH 5 to creep in. They're the people looming outside the fence. They are the 5 scary things that just loom there. They are lying in wait and they're just waiting for us to let them in. And the problem with the NIOSH 5 is they're the same 5 that they've been for quite a while.
Yeah.
Um, and anybody in the fire service, at least anybody that's been in, I'll even say a decade. I think you should be in less and probably be aware of it. But let's just go a decade to be fair,
Yeah.
which is probably the vast majority of the fire service still. A decade to 20 years is probably still fair. They know what they are. And and I would say the vast majority of department leaders, chief level officers, number 1, number 2, number 3 people, they know what the NIOSH top 5 are. And they know that they're just right outside the fence. They're just on the other side of the street. They're looking for you to let them in. And we let them in. We let them in all the time. You mentioned it in this article. They crept into this fire. And they creep in. And when they do, then things can go bad. You had a great analogy before we started the episode about the way you see them. Can you just share that analogy with me again? Because I think it's so valuable.
Oh, yeah. I think of them a little bit like a spear, right? They're kind of 5 components of the spear, and as they get closer together and close together, when they kind of come into alignment, right? You've got the tip of the spear, and you know, choose what you will out of the 5 to
Mm-hmm.
be what part of the spear it is. But once that spear comes into alignment and it gets launched, there's no PPE on the face of the planet that we're going to put our firefighters in that's going to prevent that spear from piercing right through 'em.
Yeah.
There's just not because it's going to be an overwhelming force that we're not going to be able to stop. So it's our job through our tactical supervision, through our strong command and good solid task level work to hold those at bay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hold those at bay. I think I won't use the name because I don't want to give anybody any kudos, but everybody's probably seen on television you know, some commercial about some type of decongestant and a little green man who's like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yep. Oh
And
yeah.
think of the little green man, not Toy Story LGMs, right? But the little green angry
Mm-hmm.
man on the commercial that gets all disappointed when somebody takes the medicine, right? That's the NIOSH 5. They're just standing there waiting to give you a bad day,
Yeah.
but we're the medicine that stops it. right?
Yeah.
We are the better people that stop it. Incident commanders, good, strong company officers. And let's not discount, the first whips, the senior guys and gals
Hmm.
out there who back up their company officer because their company officer might be getting a tactical assignment and they got to take a couple of rookies in through the front door and make some stuff happen,
Yep.
right? This is all levels. This isn't just single bugle, double bugle, cross bugle, three bugles. This is the entire organization from the very lowly academy recruit to the senior officer of the organization. All of us have to be together to battle those NIOSH 5.
Yeah, I think that it becomes like if you look at them at face value, some people would say, well, those are all command, those are all the bosses. Well, a lack of accountability isn't just accountability systems. It's also just a lack of
Correct.
accountability inside, and it could be inside the fire building. It can be that
Yeah.
moment when we're at the top of the stairs and a company officer goes right with one person and sends two people left, and they're supposed to come right back to the top of the stairs and they don't come back, and you got to go look for them, and they're right
Mhm.
there. But you say, "Hey, I told you to come back." Ah, we decided to hang out over here instead.
Right.
That's right, because then that changes that accountability piece. And the communication. Like, I mean, I think of the top five, the only one, and you could even call it adherence to SOPs. But I mean, if you don't have SOPs, I guess then that's a pre-fire problem. That's not a fire building problem. But everything else falls into the fire building. Everything else falls into the incident response. You can be doing risk assessments months in advance, but you should be doing a risk assessment in the moment.
Absolutely.
And when you stop doing that, when you start only using your thermal imager camera facing forward, or you only start using your eyes facing forward, you're now not conducting a risk assessment. If you're not getting that six-sided view at regular intervals, you're not doing a
Correct.
proper risk assessment.
Correct.
I have the pleasure of commuting to work every day, most days, and I don't mind my ride, but I know that I've got to look forward, and I've got to make sure I'm looking in both mirrors, side mirrors, and the rear mirror, at least at regular intervals, to have a full sight picture of what's going on around my vehicle as I hurl it down the interstate at more than the speed limit.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
like that's part of my risk assessment. And if we're not doing that inside the fire building at the incident, if we're not looking around every once in a while, we're not doing it. And if we're not doing that, that's one of the NIOSH top five. And now it's creeping in. So something as simple as having your eyes forward for 3 or 4 minutes could be what allows those little green to make their way in and cause a problem for you. Whereas if you just
Absolutely.
went, oh, look at that over there. I wonder what that. I'm going to look back at that in a few minutes and see what's going on. Nope, it hasn't changed at all, and no big deal. As opposed to that problem over there is getting worse. I need to tell somebody about that because it's getting worse, not better.
And if we think about it from the very fundamentals, take it off the fire ground. I'll go back to my very, very first day on the job as a career firefighter. And I walked in, you know, 45 minutes, hour early, right? I'm not going to be late and I want to show eagerness. I got my turnouts, my this, my that. And to this day, one of my closest, dearest friends was the firefighter. He was the senior firefighter in the house that day. He walked up and shook my hand and said, "Hi, I'm Dave. I'm going to show you where you're going to put your turnouts. I'm going to show you where your locker is and come in and sit down at the coffee table and meet everybody." Now, I'll tell you that that was the rarity, and I think it still is the rarity in some agencies across the nation. What might be the regular thing that said, "Hey, Rook, sit down over there in that chair, shut up. We're going to give you your opinion when we want it."
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the fire service I grew up in, right? And so how can we expect these young firefighters coming up to do a risk assessment and speak up about it when we've told them, shut up, just do what you're told, right? I
Right.
mean, there are firefighters out there, and I know some of them are probably listening, that have probably been in a situation where they think that they should speak up, but they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. Now, I'm not advocating just willy-nilly talk, but I'm advocating that, we spend 8, 10, 12, 16, 20, however many weeks your recruit academy is,
Mm-hmm.
building up an academy team The moment they graduate and they show up at 07 or 08, whatever time your shift change is, we're expecting them to perform as a member of your company. They've come out with all the tools and everything else. So why would you have a member of your company shut their mouth and not say anything? Involve them from the very beginning because
Right.
it's going to help you and maybe save your hide someday.
Yeah. Yeah, but so often, right? So often, you're we're,
So often it's the other way around.
you're supposed to be seen and not heard.
Exactly.
If I want your opinion, I'll tell you what it is.
Yep,
And
exactly.
that is part of the problem. And then we wonder, we're not going to get into a retention conversation. I'm holding that for another
That'll be
episode.
another time.
And but that when we talk about like not fitting. So you just hired me. You asked me a bunch of questions in an interview. You wanted to make sure that I was the right person for your job, that I was a fit, and you
Yeah,
identified me as a fit. And now I'm here, and the first thing you tell me to do is don't talk.
don't talk.
I think you identified me as a fit. I thought
Right.
that's because you wanted to hear what I had to say a little bit. And I'm not saying every day. I'm not saying that, trust me, and I don't think you are either. New people shouldn't come in trying to change everything.
No, no, not saying that at all.
But
But
but they like they should be taught that your opinion, your view matters. Your view.
yeah.
We might not care about your opinion, but the way you see things might matter to me. I might
And
not
as a,
want your spin on it right now. But I'm familiar with some academy programs that ask recruit academy programs that ask recruits what they think of their training, after a small set of time.
yeah,
And it's debatable because like they don't even know what they should have been trained on. And you're asking them if they got enough training on something. They're brand new. Like,
hmm
half of them complain they don't spend enough time doing ladders, and the other half complain they spend too much time doing ladders. And the reality is, it won't be a year from now before they can say, "Yeah, I feel actually good about what I learned," or "I wish I had learned more." Because right now they don't know. Now it's not that
right.
I don't want their view. I want their view because I want to hear how they interpret it, but I don't need their opinion of the view. Just tell me what you thought.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
and
that, going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier is, we people, right? And when I came to Corvallis, I came with a ton of fire experience. And we run our ambulance
mhm,
service here in the entire county, and we cover 780 square miles of EMS area. And obviously way more EMS calls and a much more EMS focused organization than a fire organization. So when I went out to meet my crews, and here's a funny one, and this is not a dig on the organization, I tell it as a funny story, but my first day on the job was a Saturday morning at 0700. The battalion chief who was going to train me was actually my lieutenant on engine one. He was just working up. And so, I come on, he's like, Chief, I've learned all about you. There's nothing I'm going to teach you. I'm like, no, no, Tim, that's not true. You're going to teach me plenty. But I had yet to meet my crew. They all came to work at 0700 with a new boss from the outside. And I can only imagine what they were thinking,
oh,
right?
right.
And so I said, the very first thing we're going to do after morning briefing is we're going to go out and meet all the crews. And at every one of those meetings, I said, listen, I'm going to show up on lots of calls. I'm not showing up on calls to micromanage. I'm showing up on calls because I have to understand how we do business here. And if I ask the question why, I want you to please understand that I'm not questioning how you did that. I'm questioning why do we do it that way? Maybe it's a patient care expectation. Maybe it is a long time policy, whatever the case is. But I just want to understand why we got here because we all know that the policy book, we can take a name from some employee of the past and put it on every policy, right?
Hmm.
And so I said, when I ask those questions, I want to understand the history. I want to understand how we got here so we can know whether or not we need to go down here. And once I prefaced that, and once I started working with some of my more senior members, I said, hey, when the new people come in, I want them to ask why. And I don't want you to think that they are asking because they are challenging. I want them to ask so that they can learn, so that they can grow, so that they can understand the ins and outs, so that they can be the best team member they can be. And a lot of the troops like, oh yeah, Chief, that makes absolute sense. So when you just reframe certain types of communication, I agree with you 100%. It shouldn't be your opinion about how we did this, but how did it work for you so that we can tweak it,
Yep.
right? To make it as effective as it can be. I think you hit the nail on the head for sure with that.
Yeah, it's and it's interesting concepts too. I mean, I'm assuming, I mean, the fire service, the fire service. So, people around here aren't staying. We already mentioned the retention word. People around here aren't staying as long. So if they don't stay as long, that means that there's more opportunity because typically the people that leave have, whether they're a senior firefighter or they're an entry level officer or a chief level officer, they're not staying as long. They're not staying the 32, 35 years, which means that there's openings for people faster, which means that
Yep.
younger people are promoting, which means, or people with less time, not necessarily younger, but people with less time are promoting faster, meaning that there's greater turnover in those senior firefighter ranks. Um, and we have to then rely on people saying, why? Why'd we do that?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
they're not going to have 15 or 20 years experience when they rank up for the first time. They're going to have 6. And in order to combat that lack of experience, we have to communicate a lot more of the why so that they can start to understand how we make decisions. So then they're more comfortable quicker. Because we can say, well, it's not right, and I hear it a lot. It's not right somebody with 4 years on the job got promoted. That might not be right. It might not be right. But I'll tell you, it's 2025.
Yep.
Whether we think it's right or we don't think it's right really is irrelevant. If you look at a department and the department's got 40 people that work there, and the vast majority of them have been there for less than a decade, guess what? The people that are getting promoted have probably been there less than a decade. I, I
That's my department.
yeah, like what are you going to
Yeah.
do? I
Yeah.
mean, so you answer the question why, but I also think it's up to the new people to feel comfortable asking the why, and they also need to feel very comfortable um, saying I don't know. And
Oh yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
there's some time where they don't, but then I think like I go back to where we were probably 45 minutes ago now. Your name's known a little bit, right? I mean, I don't want
Yep.
to, I don't want to. I mean, I'm a little bit of a fire dork, so like I recognize names. Your name, the night I missed a Mayday at 32 years in the fire service, 33, whatever, 34, whatever it was, right? Like that right there should be something somebody could show a new person and say, I don't even want to talk about this article with you. What I want to say is somebody who's been on the job 35 years made a mistake and they owned it. Kid, that's
Yeah.
all I want from you. That's all I want from you 35 minutes on the job. If you make a mistake, just own it. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it
Yep.
out. We might not have to write an article about it to figure it out, but we'll figure it
Yeah,
out
for sure.
and we'll move on, right? Like, but so often you say to new people, and I get it, they're scared. I think that comes from that like inflated machoism that we have in the fire service. But you say, "Hey, you understand that?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, I understand it. I got it." And the reality is they don't. They don't understand it. But
Yeah.
we haven't made them feel. We haven't peopled them enough yet to make them feel comfortable saying, "Yeah, I have no idea what you mean by that. I have no idea what you want me to do then." And I
And
still
tie
don't. Like,
and tying that back into, when we're talking about task, tactical, and strategic and communication. We advocate really hard to put a tactical supervisor in place so that we can promote as much face-to-face communication as possible. And I can tell you, having been a tactical supervisor quite a bit, you go face to face with somebody, especially, a younger officer, who, and, I can go off on a whole other tangent about how little training our fire service provides newly promoted officers. Um, but when they kind of get that, kind of puppy dog tilt, like, you want me to do what? Right? You have the immediate feedback. You have the he or she is not getting it. Either I'm not saying it right, they've never done it before, or they're like, that's way too dangerous. I can't do that, or whatever the
mhm.
situation is. So, that's where going back to our peopling comment, teaching them how to people before they get on the fire ground, is going to be a lot, to help to help with the communication, one of the NIOSH 5, right,
Yeah.
where we constantly break down. And I can go all the way back, Dean, I can go all the way back to when I was an Explorer Scout at my hometown fire department. And we weren't allowed to go on fires or calls as Explorer Scouts, but we did lots of training and we would always do an after action. And I don't think that I heard one after action review where somebody didn't talk about how communications could have been better. So in my experience in the fire service, I started as Explorer when I was 15 years old. I we've had so 15, I'm going to do the math here a little bit. I think I'm at year 38 of being affiliated with the fire service. I was a 911 dispatcher for 12 years while I was also a firefighter and a captain in Salinas, working, doing it part-time. I was a professional communicator, and we still talk about communication could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
We're really good at fixing things, but we're not we're not doing a great job fixing communication, as much as we could have. And I'm not talking about $9,000 portable radios. I'm not
Right.
I'm not talking about 700 megahertz digital trunk radio systems. I'm a radio guy, so sorry I'm putting my propeller on here for just a second. I'm just talking about the human ability to have a conversation.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, it's funny you talk about radio stuff. I worked for my dad before I got in the fire service. He owned a little repair shop, gas station kind of thing,
Yeah.
and valuable experience. He owned it for 27 years, and I worked there, the last like 15 of it. And when Nextel push to talk came out,
Oh,
my
yeah.
father and I had a communication problem that we thought push to talk was going to solve.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not so much.
Not so much. I mean, we went on to fix our communication problem, but like if we have push to talk, it's going to make everything so much easier. We're going to be able to communicate openly, whatever. And you're right. So often we think that communication problems if it's an incident related thing, it's a tech problem. Now we call it tech. It's a tech problem.
Yep.
But then if it's a leadership thing, we sit back and say, I don't know. I explained it to them. They don't understand me. Listen, if you're the person, if we think about the simple, there's the message, right? There's the sender, the receiver, the message, the medium, all
Yep.
the feedback loop. Okay, all that simple. If we think about that, if I'm the sender and the recipient isn't understanding, I have the problem because I
Yes.
want them to get my message. So I have the problem because I'm the one that wants them to take action, whether I'm communicating in a video on TikTok or whether I'm asking someone to do something on the fireground. I am communicating a message that I want the recipient to take action on. And if they're not doing what I want them to do, the first thing I got to check is me, because in the moment I might have to change how I'm communicating. One of the things at work we're talking about right now is that we communicate a lot of things in static document. Like we send a lot of recruits and fire chiefs and whatnot documents to say, do this, do that, follow these steps.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've said is, we have to migrate in 2026 into video. Instead of sending a PDF attachment to an email, we need a 90-second video that says, hi, welcome. You need to take the following steps to finish your enrollment in our program. The first thing you should do is this, and show them on the video what they need to do, because it's not 1995. They don't read an attached PDF. They skim it.
Yep.
They're used to, the recruits coming in now, and even some of the chiefs they are so used to, getting their content in video format that when you send them something flat, they don't know. And that's a testament to even the magazine, right? You can go through every magazine and any article, pretty much, if we looked at it a year from now, any article that's written that's of good value, it's been talked about on a podcast. There's been whether it's the publisher's podcast or somebody else's, there's been a video made about it. The person themselves has made some short or long form video about their article. They present on it somewhere, and that video clip is shared. Everything that's in print is also in video somewhere, because that's how people are absorbing stuff now, and that's okay. But it goes back to us understanding what people today want. understanding that 100% of the time we people.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly right. And when you think about, the chiefs that you're communicating with for their recruits that are coming in your academy, I I'm on a 3 day off right now. It's a kind of a rarity for me to get a 3 day off because of shift coverage and this and that or whatever, which is fine, no problem. I love the job. I love going to work every day. But I can take 3 days, and when I come back from those 3 days, I can have upward of 100 to 125 unread emails.
mhm.
And if I bag a job first thing in the morning, or I get back-to-back traffic collisions, or I get a traffic collision and a echo response, whatever it is, I'm not getting to an email until 3, 4 o'clock, sometimes at night. So you think about these 40-hour chiefs who are trying to do everything they're supposed to do and run their own department. They can't always run it from behind a desk.
Right.
So then what happens? Then you've got to, then you're stuck to these things,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it just gets diluted.
Yeah.
It just gets lost. And yeah, we got to come up with more creative ways. I was doing business with a vendor for my house just the other day, and they said, "Hey, would you prefer email or would you prefer text?" I'm like, "Oh, text." Right? Shot me a text, hit a link, did everything right here, bam, 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 done deal, over.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the other thing, right? We have traditions in the fire service that are amazingly good. We have to know where we've been to know where we're going. But on the tech side of things, we maybe are not as forward moving and creative as we could be. Now, there are agencies out there that are, don't get me
Yep.
wrong.
Right. Right.
But on the whole, I think that there's some opportunities, especially with the generations that we're hiring, right? With the generation, that's all they've known is tech.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
we have
Yep.
to, as the sender, right, as part
Mm-hmm.
of that communication model, we have to know how to communicate with them
Yep.
and not get frustrated when they're like, I don't understand.
Right. Right.
Okay, well, let me learn a different language then to so that I can help you understand.
Right.
So yeah, I agree.
So we've covered a lot of ground, and
Yeah.
I'll say the worst part is we could cover even more. But um, so if people are looking for you, they can find you. I mean, a simple Google search will get them, but they can find you at trainfirefighters.com. You're a lead instructor with them.
That's correct.
Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it's apparent to me in listening to you now that you teach a lot of these things you talk about. I mean, you mentioned that early on, but I think just in listening to you talk, there's mastery behind a lot of the things you've talked about. It's not something you just prepared and said right now. It's stuff that
Yeah.
you understand and you have a mastery of. So obviously, people can just find you by looking for you, but they can go to trainfirefighters.com and find you there,
Hmm.
and find some
Yep.
other and
I
some
have
other
a LinkedIn
fantastic people.
profile.
Yep,
Just they can look me up on LinkedIn. You have my email and phone number. If people reach out to you
yep,
directly, I'm perfectly okay if you share that.
awesome.
Um,
Um,
yeah, because
is
yeah,
there any, as we kind of wrap up here, any closing thoughts you have? Anything we didn't talk about that Chief Loomis would feel upset if we didn't cover it?
mm, I think I'll close with this. And you and I talked about it on the phone a couple weeks ago. I look at my role as a chief officer right now, a shift BC, but I look at my role as I do my job the best when I'm focused on helping to make my firefighters the best people they can be, both personally and professionally. I believe in them. I mentor them. I coach them. Sometimes I have to counsel them. But I want to be significant in the lives of others because I've committed 38 years to the fire service, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to commit, but I'm going to commit a bit more. And I love this profession. I will argue with anybody that it is the greatest profession, not only on the face of the planet, but in the universe. And if I can be significant in the lives of anybody who reaches out to me, I want to be able to do that because that means that I'm planting some seeds that will help the next generation take our profession further than you or I or our generation could have ever dreamed.
Hmm.
And I do that through a number of ways. And one of them is being vulnerable. which I think I showed pretty clearly in that article. And when I do after actions for, company officers and, newer chief officers or those aspiring to be chief officers, some of the best after action reviews and the best, bumper bonding conversations that I've had with people after an incident or just in the fire station is when I open with how I could have done something better or different. When I open that and show them that I'm not infallible and I can make a mistake too and commit to try to be better, everybody opens up from the most senior lieutenant to the most junior firefighters. Like, yeah, I had a firefighter the other day on a job. Yeah, I had a problem with the plug. And it was a me problem. It wasn't a plug problem. And I'm going to practice because that's never happening again. Because I opened with the things that I would have liked to have done better. And so if I can share a piece of wisdom is allow yourself to be vulnerable. I think that you'll see that there's a lot of benefit from it. And, it's not touchy-feely, it's just honesty. We're human, we're going to make mistakes. We're in a profession that gets better through learning from others. So give everybody the opportunity to learn from you. Your successes and you're not. I had a small 22-acre fire threatening multiple structures on Saturday afternoon. We didn't lose one. It was a great incident. I still felt like I could have done a couple things better. I already went back and listened to the tape. I was like, oh yeah, I need to change that next time. But everybody else said, Chief, we knew exactly what the plan was. We knew what your box was. And we had a ton of resources from 4 different counties coming to help us. Fortunately, we didn't need to use them. So you're going to have lots of successes. But I feel like I've had a lot of successes because I've been able to be vulnerable in my opportunities to improve and share that with others. So,
Yeah. Chief, thank you so much.
yes, sir, Dean. Thank you. I hope maybe on a future episode we can, talk other shop too. It's been great being on
Absolutely.
here with you. And so yeah, just the start of a great relationship with you and I for sure.
Absolutely. Our guest this episode has been Battalion Chief Brett Loomis. Mac Rice is our executive producer. My name's Dean Babineau. Join us next time when we'll be talking fire. Okay, perfect. And I can breathe now.
Perfect.
That was great. Brett, I'll tell you right now, and I'm not even kidding. Like, we could have talked for another hour.
Oh,
Like,
I could have talked to you for a week.
this has been great. Like, I make notes as we go, and about either things I want to talk more about or like things that are said that are just like so critically important. And even like you made it. I mean, you made a comment early on about breaking bread, and I had gotten a new crew at one point, and whatever. I got one of the old crotchety guys. He almost didn't want to be there anymore, and
Yeah.
and I pulled him. He was the senior guy, and I pulled him aside and I said, "Listen, here's the deal. On this shift, we eat together." And so just that's my expectation. We don't have to cook together. Like, you don't have to cook. We sit
Yeah.
and we eat together at the same time. And he looked at me, I mean, deadpan, and he just looked at me and went, "No, that's fine. I'm good. We'll eat at noon and we'll eat at 6." And I was like, you know what? Okay, yeah. And I said to everybody
Great.
else, I said, hey, listen, I talked to Raj. He said we're going to eat at noon and 6. And so that's what we're going to do. Like, we're just going to make
Yeah.
sure we're ready to eat at noon, and we're going to make sure we're ready to eat at 6. Because
That's great.
and at the end of the day, I knew eating together as a unit was important to me, because I think there's a lot of value in that, right? I grew
Yep.
up sitting around the kitchen table. In this very room, I bought my parents' house. My wife and I bought my parents' house a few years ago, and like, I'm sitting across from where I would sit as a kid, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And breaking bread, eating together was so important. And when I said it to him, and he went, "Yeah, it's fine. We'll just eat it." I said, "Okay, that's what we'll do then." And I think he was. I know now he was looking for a fight that day, because he looked for a fight every day. He was looking for me to say, you got to be flexible. We normally eat at 12:30, and I just, okay, that's what we'll do then. I told everybody else, we're gonna eat at noon and we're gonna eat at 6. So plan your breakfast accordingly, because if you eat breakfast too late, you're gonna be not hungry for lunch. We're gonna sit and eat at noon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's those little things. So I made a whole list of things. And as a matter of fact, we're only on this. You'll probably be episode 11 is my guess, and we haven't recycled anybody yet. I'm about to recycle Matt Alto. He's from Estacada, which is right.
Oh yeah. I've talked to Matt before.
So he's right up from you. I met him at a National Fire Academy class now, probably 8 years ago, and we are amazingly good friends now.
Nice.
We became fast friends, and then we've just really fostered a great relationship. He was guest one because, and I called him and I said, I need somebody to be on my podcast, but I have no listeners. Like, we don't have anybody. Like, there's no audience. And I said, so you'll be a perfect guy because no one will listen to us. And he's coming on. We're going to talk about retention in a few weeks. And then,
So funny thing about Estacada. So in my very short transition after Salem,
yep.
the interim fire chief at Estacada was one of my captains in Salem. So
Oh,
he brought me up on basically a 2-month kind of contract as his deputy chief. And my primary responsibility was writing a continuity of organization plan because they were going through a contract phase with
mm-hmm,
a larger organization, and
mm-hmm.
they weren't confident that it was going to be successful. And so I basically was the one that everything from this is your internet provider, this is who provides your telephones, this is who
Oh,
provides this. So I
that's
spent a
funny.
couple months up there, and that was a fun little agency to spend a couple months in transition and yeah, so
Yeah. So he's going to be on. We're going to talk about retention. And
good.
Chief Bashore, Mark Bashore, was on. I did a couple episodes about the administration's closing of the National Fire Academy back in the spring. And
Yeah.
Mark, we did some panel discussions. I had Mark and Dennis O'Neill and Joe Guanera, a couple other guys that I knew. We did a couple episodes with all of them. And I actually just reached out to Mark the other day and said, hey, I'd like to do an episode with just you. I really want to talk about back away from the fucking keyboard, right? His concept
Yep.
on that, and just kind of get, because I think there's an audience right now for that, because there's I mean, we live in a tumultuous world, and we always have, and we always will. But right now, there's a lot of people, I think, that hit the keyboard a little too hard and a little too fast.
Yeah.
And I think that fire officers, need to remember that we're not, although we have a right to free speech, our employers have the right to take an action against our comments.
Correct.
And that's okay. We just need to remember that. So,
Yep.
I mean, I've got some notes because, like I said, I want to continue the conversation some more, because there was just a lot of great things said, and you're amazingly easy to talk to.
Appreciate that.
And I think
Yeah.
that comes from that humility. Is that's what that just.
I'll tell you one of the reasons for that is I had a mentor years and years ago when I promoted to chief in Salinas. The fire chief that promoted me, he promoted all of us at the same time because all the other chiefs retired. And so he brought on an outside contractor that he knew. His name was Jim Brocker, and he ran what was called the Brocker Center for Excellence. And he had been a high mucky muck at GE and a bunch of other things. He wrote a book called Integrity Matters. And he sat me down one day in our one-on-one, and he said, like, he put his finger in my face. He's like, "You're mean," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "No, no, no." He's like, "Now let me quantify." He said, "Brett, you're very easy to talk to." He said, "But you're a big hulky guy, shaved head, natural furrow. People are hesitant to come confide in you. People are hesitant because the initial impression, you're not intending to do it, it's just how you are." So I was so thankful for that because from that moment on, I think I maybe became a little bit over, "Hey, how's it doing?" I saw two of my just off probation firefighters, young ladies. One's 22, one's 21, right? I mean, that's the age that we're hiring now.
Right.
They were
Yes.
at the coffee shop that I went in to have coffee at. And I walked up and gave them both hugs. "How was your shift?" Blah, 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 all this stuff. Grabbed them a little coffee card and said, "Here, coffee's on me next time." And as I was walking out, I said, "Hey, sisters, love you both. Have a great day. If you need anything, give me a ring." So it was from that conversation with Jim Brocker that I was like, to me, initially, it was overly friendly, but just establishing that relationship and knowing that I'm a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
If you need me, I'm safe. If you need somebody to cry on a shoulder, I'm here. If you need somebody to vent at, I'm here. If you're upset with a decision I made, come talk. Just come talk. So I'm so thankful for that experience with Jim to help me because I didn't see it. I was just
Yeah.
me.
Right. Right.
So,
It's funny. It is funny how those little snippets of things, whatever they are, have a profound impact on us, right? And I think
Absolutely.
we so often forget that. And we talk a lot about customer service, at least we do around here. And we talk a lot about customer service and how you don't necessarily think of what you do and say to that homeowner or that person on the medical, like the profound impact you can have, even at an unattended death or a cardiac arrest or something like that, right? And we forget that we can have that same profound impact on the people we work with and the people that are
Absolutely.
around us. We always think about the customer, but we forget about the fact that, you know what, in what I say to Chris the next time we work together might actually matter to Chris 15 years from now. I may
Exactly.
say something, and 15 years from now, he says, you know what, that changed everything for me. That thing that I might not even ever think, and you probably, I'm sure it happens to you. You talk to a lot of people. Somebody, who was I talking to the other day? And somebody said to me, they kind of chuckled and they said, "Oh, you remember?" And they remembered this story about me, and they said, "Do you remember that time we were doing this and you said this to me?" And I'll tell you, Brett, I had no, like
Yep.
I couldn't, I
Right.
didn't. It
Don't even
was
remember it.
just another day with Dean. It was just like whatever, right? And he looked at me and he said, "I will never forget that. That was such a Dean Babineau moment in my world. I'll never forget that." And I
That's
thought,
amazing.
and that's what I thought. I thought this thing, whatever it was, whatever I said in the moment, and it wasn't some big profound thing, but he's like, I will never forget what that interaction we had. It was great. And I'm like, I'm happy you feel that way. Like I'm happy we had that
Yeah.
interaction. I don't remember it. I never will. But I'm happy we had this positive interaction. Just
That,
like,
I said during the cast, I talked about being significant, and John Maxwell, leadership author and all that stuff.
yep,
He talks about the difference between success and significance, right? And success is about you and it lasts your generation or your lifetime, but being significant lasts multiple lifetimes.
yeah,
And that really rings with me. And that's why that's why I want to be the way I am with people and it's not about me wanting to be remembered for generations. It's about me wanting to make sure that they don't step into the same hole that I stepped in.
right,
So, and they might be coming to work because that's where they're getting their love right now,
yeah,
right? You've worked with plenty, right?
oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yep,
the divorce and the significant others and all of the things, the kids that are going
yep,
through, struggles at school and all that stuff. Their work might be their place where they need that respite and they need somebody to just say, you know what, you're freaking important. I love you. You're you're gonna be okay.
yeah,
And we're gonna help you be okay.
yeah.
You know?
We forget that when we work those 24s, 10s and 14s, whatever, that we may absolutely be, we oftentimes think like we're causing the problem, right? We're causing the post traumatic stress,
Right.
we're
Right.
causing the cancer, we cause all the bad things. But the reality is, for some of our people, we're the only good thing.
Exactly.
And we may never know that. We may never know that
Never
that
ever.
they park their car, they take a big deep breath, they wipe the tears from their eye, and they go, I'm going to forget about everything except for this job for the next 24 hours, 48,
Yeah.
whatever, right? And then they come in and they work and they're amazing. And if we don't look at them and say that, thanks for coming in, thanks for being you, they
Yeah.
may leave and just go right back into that world. And there's a lot to that too. Um,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
agree.